Welcome to Frame of Reference, informed, intelligent conversations about the issues and challenges facing everyone in today's world. In-depth interviews to help you expand and inform your frame of reference. Now here's your host, Raul Labreche.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Frame of Reference, Profiles in Leadership. That's right, we are not profiling people that are just any old schmo walking across the street. I don't walk around Sauk Prairie and say, hey, you look like you might be a leader, and bring them into the studio. No, I canvass the entire nation. In fact, the whole world to try to find real leaders, people that you want to listen to, because not only are they nice people, but they actually know something about something that I learned something from them. So I figure if I learn, why can't you? Okay. So anyways, my guest today is one of those such people. His name is Trent Booth. Trent is the owner, CEO, high poobah of an organization called Trent. It is Veritas Leadership. Is that right?
Veritas Leadership Group, correct.
Okay. And tell us a little bit, give us the elevator speech quick. If you were to say, yeah, I'm the owner, CEO of Veritas Leadership Group, and they say, huh? What do you say to that? Huh?
What is that? It's actually one of my favorite questions. I was in a hot tub in Kauai a year and a half ago, and the guy says, what do you do? As you would in the tub. I said, I'm an executive coach. He says, it sounds like a bunch of malarkey. He didn't say malarkey, though, but I'm assuming we have at least a PG-13 rating here. So I said, you're not wrong. It's a much misunderstood space. Coaching, if I oversimplify it, it's simply asking really smart people really good questions. He goes, well, couldn't they do that on their own? I said, you are correct. However, most of us won't stop. The tyranny of the busy starts flowing, and it's really tough to just take a pause and to pivot out of whatever's happening into what I should be doing. Yeah. In our experience, when smart leaders pause, think about what's the best version of me, what are my core values, and what should I be doing next? What are my strengths? What are we great at? What do we make good profit at? They make better decisions, and that leads to growth in the company. Veritas Leadership Group is dedicated at this point to, we've got many coaches like myself. We go into organizations, typically smaller entrepreneur, like solopreneurs that have a small team around them. I usually work with the lead person, and we have a team of coaches that works with everybody throughout the organization, asking good questions and helping the entire organization to level up.
Okay. You know, that's interesting. As you're talking about that, Trent, I'm thinking about my experience as an actor and a director. You know, my great love is in my Master of Fine Arts in Stage Direction, because all the world is a stage, right? The great Bard figured that out hundreds of years ago, and it is so darn true. Yeah. And, you know, for a long time, I thought that was sort of well, I have a theater degree, and people were like, oh, so what did you do? Goof around all that? Like, no, actually, there's a lot more to it than that. And, you know, the fact that you're responding that way, I don't know that I want to go into it right now, but the reality of theater history.
Disclosure, Raul, I was in theater college before I was even in Bible college. Sure. So I had at least a cup of coffee in fact, I did Charlie's Aunt way back in 1993 is the 100th year anniversary of it. Brandon. Yeah. Any case. So yeah, we share a background there. I should also disclose early the fact that I'm Canadian. So you are scouring the world, Raul, to your point. Yeah.
Well, you know, and it's interesting, 'cause that whole thing with acting too there, you know, in the old days, in the 19th century, there were actor managers. So addressing kind of the same question you were, can't leaders take care of themselves? Well, the reality is that actor managers who were on stage and were doing the thing, doing the play, did not have the objectivity, did not have the ability to step outside of the play and see what was working, you know, on a gestalt, you know, basis. So the director, that role of a director came out of that whole process. So I think you're speaking the same language that way with leaders that are, you know, part of their managing, you know, their day-to-day leaders that are, you know, small entrepreneurs are managing. They got their fingers in every pot there is generally. So it's really hard to take that step back and say, you know what, scene 2 is the one that really sucks right now. We need to work on scene 2. So same thing, different animal, right? But
I was asked a lot when I was a young actor. They said, oh, you must be great at lying. You lie professionally and you're a salesperson. I was like, wow, double whammy. All right. My experience with acting was it was actually harder to grab what was authentic and real and true in the word.
Yeah.
Right. So to be able to take the words on the page and portray them in an authentic, believable way, even if I was supposed to be lying within the context of the play, it was important that we actually connected more with what was true than what was the lie, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Engage the magic lie, basically, that you can get people to accept it. And it, the reality is the commonality you have to find. I know I always had to look at it from the standpoint of, even when I was playing despicable characters, people I just know they have awful actions, they do awful things. You have to come to the realization that no one sees themselves as an antagonist. So the worst people in the world see themselves as justified in doing the awful things that they do in some way. So, and there's, that's all over the place in our world today, right? All kinds of folks that you look at and think, gosh, why are they like this? And well, they're, but for the grace of God, go them instead of you. So anywho, well, a big part of the work that we're doing is we are trying to ask questions to raise awareness. Right. So that is a big part of that work, right? So sometimes we're self-delusional. Sometimes we're telling ourselves a narrative that isn't aligned with objective reality. So the more that we can ask questions to raise awareness, that gives somebody a shot of self-regulating and perhaps taking a different course. Yes, very much so. Well, so Trent and I were trying to do this conversation a couple of days back, and technology, let's just say technology was off its meds that day. And
it's awesome until
we were just struggling with, every other word was, half a word. And, it got to the point where even I recognized that there were some problems with that recording that we ought to stop and just try to do this again. So Trent is with me now. A couple of days later, we're older, we're wiser, we've got better technology, and I'm leading all up to the fact that he already had to do my favorite things, but gall darn it, you didn't hear his favorite things. So we're going to do them again, and some of them may be the same. I don't know. I don't remember what I was doing last hour, in fact. So I won't remember what I asked and what I didn't. So who knows? But here we go. Ready, Trent? You ready to do the quick, here we go?
I'm ready. I love this exercise.
All right, here we go.
Lead away.
Favorite chair?
Favorite chair? Favorite chair. You are going off the board now. You know what? This chair I'm sitting in right now, it isn't the nicest chair. It's not the sexiest chair, but it is the chair I got when I moved to Montreal in 1995, and it was my first purchase as an entrepreneur for my very own office. Ooh. So this is my favorite chair. Okay.
Well, and I'm glad that you did that, because otherwise I think your chair would probably start malfunctioning soon, because they know what's going on.
She's definitely on her last legs. I wouldn't say there's much cushion left. I'm missing some bolts, but so far so good. I'll have to upgrade to one of those really super gamer chairs.
Well, I remember Archie Bunker, right? His chair that he had was just, falling apart, but he just tried to replace it at one point, I think, and he was like, just blew a gasket because he's
not my chair. Yeah. Right? Not my chair.
I finally got it worn in just the way I want it, right? So How about your favorite song?
Favorite song? Oh, there's a version. I'm more of a live music type of guy. Okay. And there's a version live of Where the Streets Have No Name by U2, played at a Boston concert, I believe about 2001, that he quotes scripture at the beginning, and it will be played at my funeral.
Wow.
For me, it's majestic. It is, it builds, it swoons, and I think it really just moves me. My kids used to call it the magic song when we would drive around when they were very little in the car. Streets Have No Name by U2.
Streets Have No Name by, I'm going to have to remember that. Well, thankfully, I don't have to remember too hard because I can just go back and play this broadcast again. But yeah, I've listened to some U2, but I can't say I've listened to a ton of U2 music. So it'd be a good opportunity for me to reacquaint.
Recording, the Joshua Tree also holds up very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seminal moment, I would say, in rock.
Okay. How about a favorite quote?
Favorite quote. Jim Rohn used to say, when the promise is clear, the price is easy. And that has guided me quite a bit over the years. It's really getting to the idea of Napoleon Hill used to talk about having a definite major purpose, something that you're really going after. A few years back, I'm going back probably 15 years now, I did an ultra marathon. And I was picturing that's 50 miles or more in one time, one session. That's a long drive, and it's a longer run. It was 9.5 hours of pounding. And I trained for 8 months for that event. And the entire time, that was one of the mantras for me, which was, when the promise is clear, the price is easy. The inverse is true as well. When the promise is not clear, that's where it gets real difficult. And I think it does certainly speak to even the psalmist that says that where there is no vision, the people perish.
When the promise is clear, the price is easy. In other words, if you can identify specifically what you're after, you can also identify that the price is worth it because you've already identified that promise is
even though there's a lot of pain, if the pull of what the promise is, the pull of the desire is enough, that can get us through, can it?
Yeah. Boy, I just saw a song. My daughter had run across it I think it's the Maverick City group called "The Future Is Not My." Oh gosh, what is "The Future Is Not My Story"? I think. And it's basically a song about claiming the fact that I don't have to be defined by my past and I don't have to be defined by my future. I can be defined by what is now and by grabbing a hold of it, strongly. That it's really powerful because it's not only this like small group of people that are singing this song, which was written by Andrew Lake, I believe is the guy that wrote the song through a community of groups. But boy, they just get going, and then there's a pastor in the midst of it that starts talking and preaching, and it's a fantastic. I mean, one of those where you watch like 18 minutes long, and by the end of it, you're like, yes, just totally pumped up. But
I'll look forward to checking that out. That reminds me of work I did about 10 years ago. I was in a course. It's a leadership course at church, but he asked the question like, what is your identity? And a bunch of people were like, I'm a dad, I'm a sales guy, I'm a leader. And what emerged was all those were roles, all those things that we threw out. And it's not uncommon for guys to confuse their identity with what we do. But what emerged that day was a clarity for me that I am a son of God and I'm a sinner saved by grace. As much as things change over time, over the next million years, those two things do not change. Child of God, sinner saved by grace. Beautiful truth.
I just looked it up too because I knew I was getting it wrong. It's Brandon Lake and Chandler Moore. The song is called "Fear Is Not My Future." Fear is not my future.
Not my future.
Yeah,
I love that. I'll have to check that one out.
And Maverick City Music is the group that put it together. But they did a recording in Alabama, I believe. It was in memory of the North Carolina massacre with a kid that came into the Bible study and was welcomed in and whatnot, and then opened fire and killed 9 people or whatever. It's a real testimony of the fact that we don't have to be stuck in things like that. That's not our future to be stuck in that stuff. So, anywho, how about a favorite historical personality?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for Winston Churchill. That is by way of my grandfather. He just loved World War II history. He served in the Canadian Navy as well, and my grandfather on my mom's side did as well, the Air Force. But he just loved reading about it, and he passed that down to me as well. So to study Churchill, what a factor right there, man! What a force of nature. Do you have a favorite quote of his that you go to? I probably do, but I'm gonna butcher it here at this point. I'm just gonna miss it, so I'll have to pass on my Churchill quotes for today. You were a lot easier on Wednesday, man.
He never said that, you swine. There's something about him.
I should be better at memorizing.
There's something about him. A story with him and FDR. He was taking a bath or something, and stood up in all of his glory and said something about, there's nothing that I would hide personally or professionally from you, Mr. President. So, I mean, so reportedly, in politics are a little different in Britain. In Canada, they have the same parliament where you're across the aisle, like really 8 feet away from your enemy. And she said, "You, Mr. Churchill, are drunk and it's in the morning." And he responded something to the effect of, "You are correct, but you are a terrible person. And tomorrow I shall be sober. You shall remain the same." One of those. That's one that I remember. I remember that. That's a good. Churchill was just a fascinating guy. You think of how, had he not been there in World War II, had that not happened, boy, imagine how different the world could be today. Yeah. So, there's some great movies just like FDR, I think about FDR being elected in 1944, and all this talk about both candidates are too old, and it's like, did you ever see pictures of FDR when he was elected for his 3rd term? Yeah, he was not exactly the picture of health at that point. So spring chicken, huh? Yeah, exactly. How about last one? Do you have a favorite memory from childhood that when you think about it, when it comes to mind, when you're reminded of it in passing through life, right? Maybe you just see those things and all of a sudden, oh, that makes me think of it. And it's a comfortable place. It's a secure place. It's a happy place that you go back to when you recall that thing or place.
Yeah, I remember as a young boy, probably about 5 years old, just in front of the fireplace, wrestling with my dad, and his whiskers scratching my face, and what an amazing, and his smells, and just being there, wrapped up in the arms of my old daddy-o, is a tremendous memory, and it's one that as a father to now adult kids at this point, it certainly should inform how we show up as dads, and try to pay that forward and repeat the positive aspects of that going forward.
Sure. Well, Trent, you've had, I have to say, the things that we talked about the other day, you've had a really interesting journey from what we talked about in terms of how you got from your initial career moves and steps to where you are now. And yet I feel the same way with my own journey. I look back at things and think, that was a necessary point in order for me to get to where I am now. That was even though maybe at that time it was really hard and I really struggled with, why aren't I a big star, and all that nonsense. Yeah. But I can look back at it and say, no, it's good that I'm thankful for that, because that was super critical to who I am today. What was your journey like? Do you resonate with that? Does that make sense?
Oh, it really does. I actually would celebrate that as well. If I believe in a God that's going to work all things to good, that means even those valley experiences, not only was I not alone, I was seen, loved, carried through. Not only that, those are so important for me to have empathy to be able to serve others well now. It's been a while since I've done keynote speeches, but I would often ask audiences and connect with them on those valley experiences. Not everybody can relate to being on the mountaintop. But when I invoke something like, hey, tell me about your worst day, or think about your worst day for a moment, everybody has probably a day, if not a season, that they can point back to and say, that was hard. And I would say that if we handle those valley experiences well, I believe that we are equally invited to help others through their valley experiences because we've been through that valley. So even for our kids, with one of my friends, we talked about trying to put our kids in opportunities where they can get punched in the face by life. Because as visceral as that example is,
builds character.
We've skinned our knees and we've been laid low. In fact, I would be very nervous to lock arms with another leader that had not suffered or been through some difficult days. In terms of seasoning and forging of character. Hear me. I crave comfort like everyone else. I would rather trade in a second my battle scars for comfort. However, I do not lament the fact that they are designed to help me help other people. Both the good and the bad days are designed for me to bring comfort to others. So there's a song by Metallica called Show Your Scars. It's called Broken Beat Scarred, and one of the lyrics in the song is show your scars. Now, for me, it's not a matter of declaring my awesomeness so much as I'm not ashamed of my scars either. Speaking the words of Paul.
There's a song to that effect. I forget the name of the artist. Thank You for the Scars. I think it's a contemporary CCM piece, but that also, I'm a big Star Trek fan. I mean, since I was a little kid, I've been watching it since '66 when it was actually on TV.
Wow.
And it was, I remember as the movies came along, it's always been interesting that the odd-numbered movies, there's like a Star Trek curse that the odd-numbered movies always suck, and the even-numbered movies are wonderful. And I challenge that.
What's up? Number 2, right?
Well, and I challenge that because actually one of my favorite moments, or some of my favorite moments in films, are in 5, which the search, that one got the God thing or whatnot. But there's a wonderful thing in there where Sybok, the Spock's half brother, is trying to get get followers by taking away their pain, and he does it successfully with McCoy, and he tries to do it with Spock, and by doing taking their worst day basically and trying to, get to the point where once he has that pain that he takes that pain away, and he tries to do the same darn thing to Kirk, and Kirk says, I don't want you to take away my pain. I need my pain. And it's a wonderfully acted moment by Shatner. And that scene made me think about, he's absolutely right. If you take away a person's pain, you take away a good part of their definition. And that to me was a really insightful thing. That and the campfire scene where they're singing "Row, row, row your boat," and Spock says, "Captain, life is not a dream."
I took my daughter to the Museum of Natural History at one point, and they had here in Philadelphia area where I live now. We live outside in New Jersey, but we took her to this butterfly exhibit, and she was seeing this butterfly emerge from the chrysalis, and she was traumatized as a kindergartner. She said, "Daddy, this butterfly looks like it's dying, trying to emerge from the cocoon. Why doesn't somebody help the butterfly?" And I had to whisper to her. I said, "Babe, if we help the butterfly by opening the cocoon and it doesn't fight to get out, it will surely die. The butterfly needs to exercise against that resistance to get the fluid in its wings so that when the wings dry, it can fly. Otherwise, it will die."
Boy.
So the butterfly requires the struggle to be able to fly. And it's been something that's really guided her and I since that magical moment, 17 years ago.
Wow. Isn't that cool? I'd never known that before. They had a butterfly exhibit.
We need the struggle.
Yeah. Well, just another great example of how everything is designed, right, to inform other things. Is there a lesson that you think, I don't know that you could pin it down to one, but would you say that there's a critical lesson that you think most leaders have had, but don't realize how critical it is? Is there such a thing as a singular, or is it just a particular theme or idea? Is there something that you think is so core that any leader that doesn't experience it or have some crucible moment, if you will, like that it's just always going to hinder them, and they need to learn to embrace it somehow?
Yeah, I would say in general, the whole concept of adversity, when I'm talking to sometimes young leaders, let's say a young guy in his 20s, I remember having this one conversation, and he was a bit of an outlier. He got out to a nice start of his career, and I asked him about his worst day, and he didn't have an answer. I was very concerned for him because that means it's still in front of him. And if you haven't been battle tested, if you kind of haven't got your sea legs, the time to discover those sea legs is not in the biggest storm. You want to get those beforehand. So what I would say, generically speaking, is that the best leaders I've observed over time are the ones that learn the lessons, even in those hard seasons. Whether the mistake was theirs or somebody else's, they're looking to grow from that. They're looking to mine those difficult experiences for as much silver lining as they can pull out of that, so that can inform other decisions going forward, or perhaps help them feel differently about what happened that past time, to kind of work through it. The point being that what you show me a leader with no scars, and I'm not sure we're looking at a leader.
Sure. Do you think, I look at today's world and the folks that are, a lot of the folks that are leaders by position, and they're not leaders by the quality of people wanting to follow them. And yet I also see people that are being followed that I look at and think, why? Why are people following that person? And the single thing that I see in that is the leaders that are in either of those categories, whether people are following them or not, tend to be people that put the onus of a failure, any failure, on someone else, something that was unfair to them, something where they get to play the victim, if you will. I don't know if victim's the right word, but they get to be the protagonist that was unfairly, hit by whatever this circumstance was. What is it about that because to me, that's like the antithesis of a good leader. I think of Harry Truman and saying the buck stops here. It's just that quality of saying, you know what, even if I didn't make the decision myself directly, as the leader, I still have to take responsibility for the fact that it happened. And more so, I have to take responsibility for getting us out of the consequences of that now. am I misreading things? But that attitude, that environment in our culture today, globally and in the U.S., really concerns me.
See, I don't know if it's new. I would argue it's not necessarily new. However, we're seeing more of it because of the proliferation of social media. So everyone has a microphone now.
Right.
There's a title of a book called The Death of Expertise. And the challenge is anybody who hangs a shingle can be an expert now. Now, that could be wonderful as equal parts crazy, if not filtering the voices that we're listening to, right? Mm-hmm. So somebody doesn't have to declare themselves as a leader. If they're an influencer, by definition, they're leading. Now, the question is, are they leading well or are they leading poorly? My friend Andrew Cavledge is a pastor at our church, and he'll walk up to a young kid and he'll say something to the effect of, you are clearly a leader. You demonstrate all kinds of leadership qualities. The question is, are you going to be a good leader or a bad one? And I'll joke about, hey, let's keep this kid on the path for good. Because if we start chasing the path for evil, who knows where that could go, the next Darth Vader. The point being that we've got to find ways to invite people to step into that narrow path to lead well. And if you talk about accountability being part of that, it's a tricky time because I would say I've seen abuse go both ways. I've seen people say things like, well, the secret. And they say that I am absolutely responsible for everything that happens around me. Now, they're a big fan of when that means that led to my becoming wealthy. And this is an old ethic, the secret. It hasn't even been relevant for, I would say, 15 years. Those same people aren't taking responsibility if they've got cancer. And it's part of the same reason I would throw that whole ethic out of the secret. I'm glad it's not a thing anymore, but it's not new again, right?
Right.
So taking responsibility for everything will just make us tired. Trying to influence things that we cannot or should not, and are not meant to influence. Praying for a sunny day on my wedding is probably not the right way to spend time on my knees. Praying that I would have a great day regardless of whether it's raining or sunny, that's probably the better ethic, right? Lord, would you change me? It's not all about me. On the other side, I do encourage leaders to take as much accountability, responsibility as they possibly can. It is wildly refreshing because of the dynamic that you're referring to. Regardless of politics, if you take a look at both sides, would say, hey, if they have messed up, nobody's saying I done messed up here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nobody's taking responsibility for it. And the more that we get desensitized to that, the more we celebrate leaders who are not only not taking accountability, but are being celebrated for that. Unfortunately, I would say that we were reinforcing that weak ethic. That said, there's always, if Mr. Rogers says during 9/11, there's always somebody running towards the fire. There's people helping. I would say there are voices that are also helping, saying, take responsibility, own what you can in a challenge. Even if I'm reaching a little bit, I'm going to own anything I can in our conflict with one another because I want to be able to move forward. That takes humility, which is also, I would say, in short supply today. However, it's not gone, but when you find it, let's spend more time there.
Do you have a relatively, do you find yourself going to a litmus test of sorts when you're listening to someone or, observing someone's leadership style? Is there any kind of careful there, careful.
Yeah, the spidey sense starts tingling once I find somebody sharing and I don't find them to be authentic or genuine.
Okay.
And I think that there is a greater scrutiny and it's appropriate and good in terms of being able to determine who's being authentic, who's being real. Gary Vaynerchuk would be one of my guilty pleasures right now. Not safe for work language. It's typically very, sentence enhancers, spiced throughout, right? That said is, you don't question whether he believes what he's saying and whether he's being authentic and real, if you will. And that real piece is very attractive. I would even argue politically, you've seen, part of what people have loved about Donald Trump is the fact that, that guy does speak. God, he sounds like us. And we prefer that to the political speak that we've been hearing for years. I think you can make an argument, maybe we swung the pendulum too far. That said is, right?
You think?
People who, if they say things that are just not true. So, as much as that background had theater school and then Bible college, I didn't finish any college in the end. I'm grateful for that season in Bible college because I pinned down what I would call presuppositions, shortcuts with how the world works. I'm still open to learning and even tweaking some of those core values. That said, is now I've got a coffee filter, which I could run all these ideas through. I got this nice basket of coffee grounds, and I'm going to keep this delicious pot of coffee, and I'm going to throw out the coffee grounds. So regardless of the speaker, even if I'm listening to a John Maxwell, I'm always asking, is what he's saying true? And I prefer to listen to more and more people where I'm going 99% of the time or all the time. Wow, yes, it's a lot less work to filter here because they're just spot on.
Sure.
As opposed to, oh, well, is it though? It's one of the ways that I define good or great books. If the book is just good, I'm like, put it down. The world's full of great books waiting for you. You don't have enough time to get all the great books in. Put a good book down. I started reading a book called The Four Agreements. I thought it was terrible. And I wanted to like push through it just to see, hey, is this going to help me change a little bit or tweak my philosophy? I'm like, no, this book just objectively for me has things that I just diametrically am opposed to. I'm like, yeah, it's not true.
Sure.
So I put the book down. I think I'm good.
Move on.
I explored. Oh, moving on.
Right. Do you mentioned before how, nowadays with our social media that everyone can be an expert. And that to me is perhaps one of the most dangerous signals that I see, because we really do have experts in various domains. There really are people that have studied it, have looked at the data, have analyzed the data, have seen things in that domain from so many different angles, way beyond most of us, end up having as an opportunity or the time to do so. So to me, that kind of expertise is always going to be different than someone that has an opinion about it, but for whatever reasons, their degree of influence, their degree of charisma, whatever, their degree of affability and affinity with what I come to that media with, because I'm going to confirmational bias, right? I'm going to have a preconceived notion of what I think is true. And when I hear this, guy or gal saying something like, yeah, I've seen that too, I'm much willing to buy the lie that this person is an expert. How do you combat that? Is there such a thing as a magic elixir that can get people to do that critical thinking again that requires, as you're saying, right? It doesn't quite ring true. Because I fear that too many of us are not even taking that step anymore. We're just saying, well, he said it and I believe him and I believe it and that's what I'm operating on. It's like, yeah, but did you look at all? No, that's all fake news. That's all blah, blah, blah. Right. And once you start doing that, then everything's up for grabs. I mean, I don't get it.
Yes. It's super easy just to tune into my favorite channel for my news and not have to think.
Yeah.
And just accept it. And by the way, both sides have it. Again, I'm coming from Canada where we've got 4 parties. In the States here, it's a little more binary, right?
Right.
Left or right. And I'm going to watch my news and I don't have to think, yay.
Right.
Here, and I love it when people I'm coaching, when they form the question and as they're doing it, they actually answer their own question. And you said it when you described critical thinking. And one of the reasons that we sacrificed to put our kids through classical private school was the whole concept, the desire for them to learn how to think, not just what. And of course, we hope that their core values are aligned with ours when they come through that. However, that has to be secondary to teaching them how to critically think, right? So they learned logic.
Yeah.
They went to the original source. Instead of reading somebody writing about what the slaves experienced, they would read a journal from a slave.
Right.
They would go back to the original. And then they learned by clashing and having debate and talking through those big ideas.
Sure.
And with a logic tree, using simple math even, being able to come up with, well, if this means this and this is this, then that can't be true. So if objective truth can be discerned, can be determined, right, to pursue that actually matters. And you asked about Veritas Leadership Group. The term Veritas is simply Latin for the word truth. I believe that if we ask enough questions, the truth can emerge, the truth can set us free, and we can be able to get unstuck and move forward, whether it be business or life, etc. So for our kids, what you can't do, the genie's out of the bottle when it comes to social media. We're not going to undo Web 3.0. This is a thing. And now we got AI on top of it. Yeah. AI, studying lies. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah. Right. We have to be able to engage a critical mind to filter all the thoughts, because there's a lot of them, right? And regardless of whether somebody's got a title or not, we want to filter both, right? I am more prone to believe a doctor But that's more my generation.
Right.
My daughter did a thesis at the end of her high school, like senior year, on the distrust of doctors right now.
Right. Right.
So here's a classic example. I'm going to put Tony Robbins on blast because people go, oh, you're a leadership coach. You must love Tony Robbins. He's actually the one guy. I've never attended one of his events or celebrated one of his CDs. I was listening to one time. My wife is a dietitian, educated by science to know how the body digests food. Tony Robbins comes out and says, hey, the same enzymes that digest meat cancel out the enzymes that digest potatoes. And you're having meat and potatoes. No wonder it takes so long to digest. This is my dietitian wife. I said, is this true? She said, no, that's simply not how the body works. But Tony Robbins is charismatic. Right. He states it with such conviction that it must be what? It must be true, regardless of what.
And spicy science. Words. So
right? Science says, yes.
Right.
Well, and he does, yes. Right. He's not afraid of sentence and answers either. I'm just saying, at some point, I'm like, well, if he's wrong on that one, what else is he wrong with? Because my grandfather used to say there's never one cockroach.
Right. Well,
if he's wrong here, he's probably wrong in other areas. Flag on the play. Let's start paying attention to what's being said.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that too, those personalities, that force of will is oftentimes what you can look at and say, well, they're just willing it to happen. I mean, they're so convinced that they are right and that they have the answer that they're just going to push through. They're going to push down. They're going to, push aside anyone that gets in the way of that. And that strong man or woman, mentality is really getting a lot of traction. And as you said, it's not a new thing. It's just, maybe social media just made it much more, we're seeing it in a lot more colors. It's like, and NBC in full color, well, now we're seeing that.
I'm not going to make many friends today in the leadership community because I'm going to take a shot at Steve Jobs here today. Saint Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah, boy,
Patron saint of Apple, right? Who, if you read his book, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, no. So they described it as a reality distortion field going out from him. And when it worked, it was great. That's how come we're all on an iPhone right now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Coming to you from a Mac. However, there's many times where it did not work, especially when he's like gaslighting his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Especially when he's trying to gaslight the board and eventually they throw him out. There's certain things where that's not okay. That's not good. Actually, that's terrible in that case.
Right.
The challenge being if we study that and say, okay, well, it worked here. And because it pragmatically was effective in this one moment, now we need to study Steve Jobs in executive leadership. And I'm saying, no, actually, that would be a cautionary tale of woe when we're not listening to our people and connecting with them, when we're not enrolling those around us. That actually is a terrible way to lead. And we need to use that example. I'm glad I read the book still, but I'm celebrating Steve Jobs a little less at the end of the day.
Right. And it's kind of that, what's the model I've heard people talking about, the extrinsics of a leader versus the intrinsics of a leader. And the extrinsic is much more about the, outer, get the job done, blah, blah, just very objective, very, we hit this profit margin, we hit this goal, everything is very, and that's what defines, right? The old adage of Andrew Carnegie must have been a fantastic leader because he was so financially competent and, built such a huge empire. Whereas intrinsic leaders are much more about but are our people feeling like they're actually growing? Do they want to be a part of what's going on here? Are they feeling safe and wanting to work together? And both sides look at that and I think see the other side as either weak or stupid. I'm not sure which thing. So do you, when you're working with leaders in your tutelage, do you look at those sorts of things and just try to say, well, yeah, this has got applications here, this has got applications here. You've got to find your marriage of those two so that you can be as effective as you probably can be. Does that make sense?
So as a coach, we're trying to be really curious as opposed to really decided or really judgmental even. So we're trying to bring a non-judgmental feedback loop to this scenario. Okay. That said, of course, I've got a bias one way or the other. So as much as that is shaping some of the questions, the more open-ended questions I can ask and not allow them to just park where they're comfortable. We want to help them range out a little further from that. So here's where this often will show its head. They'll ask a binary question like, is this right or am I crazy? Is this a good strategy or am I way off here? And I can say, well, what else could it be? There's many other options. It's usually not just two options here as we're working through what we could do here. What else could we do? What if we didn't have to be right? What else could we do? Hey, have you thought about this? So I'm trying to ask sometimes leading questions to help them arrive at other possibilities for them then to decide which direction that they're going to take. And hear me right. Unless they're running off a cliff, most times I'm going to let them run where they're going. If it's not the way I would choose or not, that doesn't matter. Sometimes they come up with A, B, C, D, and I'm going, D's the option. They go, I'm going to run with A. I said, all right, tell me about A. If A went bad, where could that happen? Could that go south? We work through it. We vet it. They're confident. They're comfortable. And their strategy is A, and they've got a great strategy. Now, we're going to talk again in 2 weeks. Well, if they were wrong, sometimes we know in 2 weeks. And if they scrape their knees a little bit, it's usually not a career-ending injury. Mm-hmm. Might have to come out for a play, but we reassess. Sometimes we go back to the old pile of solutions and pick a new one. Sometimes we got to come up with a new board, right? But that gives us an opportunity to learn, but to learn quickly, if you will. Now, on the other side, I'll tell you, Raul, I've had people where I'm like, D's the answer. They go back to A, and A works. And I'm like, that's crazy. Now, I can't share that. It's not my job to share that.
Right.
There's no way that worked. That's amazing. No, wrong response, right? New coach. Experienced coach says, nice. Tell me more about that. Because here's the thing. I have to trust that they know the map of their life far greater than I could. In other words, I'm not a consultant. As a coach, then I'm designed to really hold a mirror up for them and give them greater knowledge that if there is spinach in the teeth, they can see that. If they need to fix a hair, it's out of place. I'm holding that mirror up, raising awareness so that they can make the choices. The good news is when D or A works for them, it works for them. And it wasn't me that became awesome. That's also helped me function in business areas or even industries where I have no experience. Right. Maybe I learned the language and I can ask good questions, but what do I know about finance? And actually financial advisors has been the niche that we've drilled down into over here. And I've learned the language, what's an FIA, all that fun stuff, but I don't come up in that world. I came up in a sales world. So I can still lead because I'm not trying to be a consultant for them or a business guru. In my experience, they have the answers if they can slow down long enough, pause long enough to consider what the best moves are, what their strengths are, and where they could go. That's when we get the magic. Frankly, part of that too, Raul, is they're more likely to try the solution that they came up with. Yeah. So I didn't have to sell them on it. Yeah. And if they meet resistance with that, if they don't get immediate success, they've got faith to push through that because it is theirs, right? And keep in mind, before they left, we vetted their plan. So we've gone through it together, and now they've got where it used to be just an army of one. There's at least an army of two now. I'm waving pom-poms for them and celebrating their action. And as they move forward, that is so much more satisfying than just deferring to a consultant, if you will.
And maybe it's because you've got some acting background too, but as you're saying things, I keep thinking of acting and directing exercises that I use with people. And that makes me think of an exercise I found it can be really successful and helpful with people is to ask an actor to say to me, okay, here's your line, to be or not to be, right? And then I'll say, okay, you need to now take that line to yourself and say, where is the pause? And I'll give the example of to be or not to be, or to be or not be, or to be or not to be. I mean, each of those pauses, right, in a different place says a different thing. It's exactly the same words, right? Exactly. And yet the pause is what makes all the difference. So I use that as an example to say, you need to realize where your pauses are, where you will be most authentic with the line, because that pause makes the most sense to you. So translate that. And I have people, regularly, it's like, no one ever said that sort of thing. I said, well, let me tell you, as a guy that has experienced a lot of pauses in life, I can tell you for sure that the pauses are some of the most important things that you do in life. So anyways, sorry, I went off.
It's a great leadership principle from acting. It really is, because words, they do matter, but so do the pauses. And I'll actually use that same analogy when I'm working with people to not send the angry text. They want to handle conflict via email or text. And I'm like, well, your pause doesn't go at the same place theirs does. So you said to be or not to be, and they read to be or not to be. This guy wants to be dead. No, that's not what we said.
Right.
That is what the words are. So interpretation really does matter. And even taking that further, by giving an actor an opportunity to have choices. Mm-hmm. So instead of and there are directors that still do this. No, that's wrong. That's terrible. Instead of, okay, I see what you did there. What if we put emphasis on a different word this time and a different pause this time? What if you played with 5 different ways to do it, or all the possible ways to do it? And there are a finite number of ways for those 6 words or whatever it is, right? There is a finite combination. Try them all and see which one matches the character's motivation best. Wow. Now that's open-ended. Now, instead of like there's right and there's wrong, there's still layers here of beauty. That's more the art. And that's where we need both art and science, right?
Right. Well, it's the beauty of quantum computing, right? Quantum computing, and finally, computers are going to have the ability to not just do yes or no, but both. So when you have the opportunity to do both, then there's infinite numbers of capabilities or, possibilities, which I'm curious to see how that turns out. So I hope AI is a little better.
I mean, really.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope it's better at discerning what's true and what isn't than we are oftentimes.
Well, that's why we're always going to need humans. And I'm a big fan of AI when it works for us, again, similar to technology.
Right.
But again, the same thing that allows us to connect. I mean, across the country at this point, it's amazing the fact that we get to do this. I forget that I'm actually in a studio in my basement in New Jersey. I've just been communing with you. What a time to be alive. Where even 4 years ago, I used to ask people, like, do you have Zoom? I don't even need to ask that anymore. Right? How quickly things are coming up. But even when it comes to AI and technology, the hands of the user is going to determine whether that's used for good or it's used for bad again, including even things like AI,
So we're going to run out of time. Of course, that's what happens when I get talking with somebody I'm enjoying talking with. I hope you're enjoying talking with me. Oh, God, who knows? But anyways, all that being said, do you, with your leadership with Veritas, is there a screening test or an initial interview test that you do that helps you determine and helps the people considering using your services, helps you determine, is it a good fit? Will this work? Is this a person that just is too far down or, too entrenched in a way of thinking that probably not going to be a good fit, and vice versa, things that you would encourage a potential client to do to determine for themselves, am I a good fit with what you're trying to do right now?
Yes. Great question. Very often people can check out some of our material, myself, the other coaches, et cetera, and see if there's a vibe check. If there's a vibe fit right away, that's a good start. If they listen to a podcast that I've done and they go, hey, that resonates with me, chances are very good, because I have been working really hard to try and have the same guy that I show up here would be the same guy on the coaching session starting in 15 minutes. I want to be the same guy in both spaces. And it's not a fit for everybody, and I get that. Right. It's rare that I'll get on a call with somebody and we're just not a fit, depending on maybe what they're looking for or what I do. Sometimes people are really looking for therapy, and that's not a fit in coaching. We're assuming that somebody's relatively healthy, happy, and whole. They really need to do some of that deep work. Boy, I celebrate a great therapist. I'm not done needing therapy. Right? At some point, right? That's a great spot for them. Coaching's a different ethic altogether. Occasionally, though, what I will encourage people is, hey, at the end of our time together, this intake session, if we're not a fit, you'll have a better rubric to determine what you are looking for to find the right coach. That is important. This is one of the most intimate relationships that you're going to set up. You get to choose, like every other relationship. In this case, I would say measure twice, cut once when it comes to your coach. You want to make sure you've got the right one, because this will probably be a relationship. In our case, it's more common that it's years than just weeks or months. Usually we have a very high retention rate because we do typically fit. Sometimes people are looking for, hey, I want the Tony Robbins, whatever the mind of a man can conceive, it can achieve. I'm like, okay, I'm not your guy. I do have a buddy that does that type of coaching. Here he is, and he's going to be a fit for you. But typically speaking, it usually is a fit by the time I'm dialing in with somebody. And sometimes it's like, hey, it's the right idea, but the wrong time. Right. Maybe they have the resources for it right now, at least them knowing where this is. And we do have a lot of free resources between podcasts and YouTube, and we're putting out a lot of content, even from podcasts like this to be able to help people get them unstuck, et cetera. But yeah, I definitely recommend that you pay attention to who's mentoring you, who's leading you, that voice of reason, because things are going to beat the screen, right? We talked about the filter and our critical thought. Things are going to beat the screen. We're going to be influenced by those we're listening to. So let's make sure that the person that we are attaching our wagon to they're on a path that we want to be on.
Sure. And you better know what that path is. Do the gut check.
Throughout.
Right.
Yeah.
Folks, my guest today has been Trent Booth. Trent is the CEO and founder of an organization called the Veritas Leadership Group. Trent, where should people go if they want to know more about you, your group, your mantra, your special sauce? Where should they go?
The website is probably the best place. That is veritasleadershipgroup.org. It might be easier to find Trent Booth. I'm on almost all social media platforms. If you search Trent Booth, you'll find me. TikTok, I'm trying to stay on TikTok now. It's the one where it's not super relevant, but I'm the Bent Truth on TikTok. That's where you'll find me there. Coach one time called me the Bent Truth, not Trent Booth. So if you look Trent Booth, you'll probably find me. Although at last search on Google, there were 8 of us on Team Human. So I am the first. I'm the oldest of the Trent Booths. I'm one of 8 at last count, but I'm the oldest. So Trent Booth Prime. If you go to veritasleadershipgroup.org or YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, would love to connect with you there. For any of your listeners here, by the way, we would love to give them even a free 25-minute intake session. Hey, it's coaching for me. Could we be a fit? Would love to provide that for them. There's a way to sign up for that on the website.
Excellent. Well, and I got you beat, Trent. I'm the only Raul Brush on LinkedIn. Yes.
Look at you.
Yes.
I love it.
Trent Booth. Trent, you're not in any relationship. I should have asked you this early on. Any relationship to John Wilkes Booth?
I love the question, as offensive as it is, because I'm Canadian. And what you just asked is his great-great-great-great-grandpa, is he an assassin? And the answer is no.
Okay, good.
And Ancestry DNA helped confirm that. However, we live in the United States now, and we adopted a beagle who was named Nixon when we got it. We thought that was cruel and unusual punishment. So we did rename him Lincoln. His name is Lincoln J.W. Booth. We're trying to bring the two sides together here.
Well,
That's all about peace.
See, that's what the world needs now, is mending offenses like that. So thank you, Trent, for doing your small part in the beagle dome.
Doing our part.
Trent, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I hope we can get together some other time. That would be wonderful to continue the conversation.
Me too. Thank you. What a generous host. Really appreciate your time, Raul. Nice to meet you. You
too. Take care. Folks, you've been listening to Frame of Reference. I'm Raul LaBrush, and you are not. And we've been talking with Trent Booth, the Trent Booth, the first one. Okay, he's not like one of those derivative Trent Booths, right? You're the original, the real deal. So
there are many variants, except no other.
Thanks for listening, folks. Hope you can tune in next week when we'll hopefully have someone nearly as charming. I don't know that we'll have someone as charming, but maybe nearly as charming and wonderful to talk with as Trent has been. Take care.